3 years ago, I lost an entire bed of tomatoes to blossom and rot, and I lost most of my pepper crop to sunscald. The soil was bone dry by mid-July, even though I was watering every single day. Last summer, using the mulching system I learned from my Amish neighbor Eli, I harvested over 200 pounds of tomatoes and close to 60 pounds of peppers from the same beds, and I watered less than half as often. That is not an exaggeration. The difference was mulch, but not mulch the way most of us have been doing it. I got my first real look at Amish mulching about 5 years ago when Eli invited me over to see his garden in late July. It was 92 degrees that day. My garden back home looked like it was barely surviving. His looked like a magazine cover. Every bed was buried under a thick blanket of organic material, and when he pulled back a corner and told me to feel the soil underneath, it was cool and damp, like it had rained that morning. It had not rained in 2 weeks. Today, I am going to walk you through exactly how and why Amish gardeners mulch the way they do, the specific materials they use, the depths they apply, the timing that matters, and how this one practice solves about 5 problems most of us fight separately all season long. And stay with me to the end, because I will share a mulching technique Eli showed me for protecting fall crops that extended my harvest by nearly a full month, and I have never seen it in a single gardening book. I will be honest with you. For the better part of 20 years, I thought I understood mulch. I would buy a few bags of shredded hardwood from the garden center in spring, spread a thin layer around my tomatoes, and call it done. Some years I skipped it altogether because it felt like extra work that did not make much difference. If that sounds like you are not alone. I was right there too. What I did not understand, and what cost me years of better harvests, is that I was treating mulch like decoration. A little here, a little there, mostly for looks. When I finally spent serious time watching how Eli and other Amish families in our area handle their gardens, I realized mulch is not a finishing touch for them. It is the foundation of their entire growing system. That completely reset my thinking. And once I started doing it their way, the results came fast. Picture an Amish family sitting down for supper. 8 people at the table, maybe 10. Every one of them fed from that garden through the growing season, and from the cellar through winter. There is no grocery store safety net. If the garden underperforms, the family feels it directly. Eli explained it to me simply one afternoon. He said, "The soil is doing all the work. Your job is to protect the thing that feeds you." He was not being poetic, he was being practical. When you have a dozen mouths counting on what comes out of the ground, you cannot afford to lose moisture to evaporation, lose crops to temperature swings, or spend hours every week pulling weeds. Mulching everything, and mulching it thick, is not a preference for Amish gardeners. It is a necessity born out of the reality of feeding a large family from limited land. Every square foot has to produce, and mulch is what makes that possible season after season. That is the lens I want you to hold as we go through this, because once you understand why they do it, the how makes perfect sense. Here is what you need to understand before we get into the method itself. Most of us think of mulch as a way to keep weeds down, and it does do that. But for Amish gardeners, weed suppression is almost a side benefit. The primary job of mulch in their system is moisture regulation. And this is where the science gets interesting. Bare soil on a 90-degree day can lose up to 30% of its moisture through evaporation in a single afternoon. Research from the University of Maryland Extension has shown that a 4 to 6 inch layer of organic mulch can reduce soil moisture loss by up to 70%. That is not a small number. That is the difference between watering every day and watering twice a week. Here is exactly what to do. Before you mulch anything, water your beds deeply. You want the soil saturated to at least 6 to 8 inches down. If you mulch over dry soil, you are locking in the dryness, and rain will have a harder time penetrating the mulch layer to reach the root zone. So soak it first, then mulch. Use a trowel to check. Dig down about 6 inches. The soil should feel like a wrung-out sponge, damp but not dripping. That is your baseline. For timing, in zones 3 through 5, lay your mulch 2 to 3 weeks after your last frost date, once the soil has had a chance to warm. Mulching too early in cold climates keeps the soil cool and slows root development. In zones 6 and 7, you can mulch right around transplant time. In zones 8 and 9, get your mulch down as early as possible, because moisture retention becomes critical fast once summer heat arrives. Now let me show you exactly what material materials to use and why it matters. This is where the Amish approach starts to look very different from what most garden centers recommend. Eli does not buy mulch. Nobody in his community does. They use what is already on the farm, and the material they reach for most is straw. Not hay, straw. That distinction matters enormously. Hay is cut grass that is full of seed heads. If you spread hay on your garden, you are planting a weed crop. Straw is the leftover stalks from grain harvest, wheat or oat straw being the most common. It has very few seeds, it breaks down slowly enough to last the season, and it creates excellent air pockets that let water pass through to the soil while still blocking evaporation from below. Apply straw mulch 6 to 8 inches deep. I know that sounds like a lot. When I first watched Eli pile it on, I thought he was burying his plants, but straw compresses. 6 to 8 inches of loose straw settles down to about 3 to 4 inches within a couple of weeks, and that is the sweet spot for moisture retention and weed suppression. If you cannot find straw, the next best option is shredded leaves. If you collected leaves last fall and ran them through a mower or leaf shredder, that material's gold. Apply shredded leaves 4 to 5 inches deep. They pack tighter than straw, so you need less depth. Whole unshredded leaves mat together and can prevent water from reaching the soil, so always shred them first. What about wood chips? The Amish families I know use wood chips on paths between beds, never on the beds themselves for annual vegetables. Wood chips tie up nitrogen as they decompose, and that nitrogen is pulled from the top layer of soil right where your vegetable roots are feeding. For perennial fruit trees and berry bushes, wood chips are fine. For your tomato and pepper beds, stick with straw or shredded leaves. 1. More material worth mentioning. Grass clippings can work in a pinch, but only if they are spread thin, no more than 2 inches, and only if the lawn was not treated with herbicide. Thick layers of grass clippings turn into a slimy, anaerobic mat that smells terrible and can actually harm your plants. Thin layers mixed with straw work well. Thick layers on their own are trouble. Here is where the Amish method really separates itself, and it is the part that surprised me most when I first saw it. The conventional approach is to mulch around the base of each plant and leave the pathways bare, or just throw down some landscape fabric. The Amish mulch everything. Every square inch. The beds, the paths between beds, the walkways, even the edges where the garden meets the lawn. Nothing is left bare. The reason comes down to basic soil biology. Bare soil does not just lose moisture. It also heats up dramatically in direct sun, and that heat radiates into your beds from the sides. Research from Cornell University has documented that bare soil pathways between raised beds can increase soil temperature in adjacent beds by as much as 8 to 12 degrees Fahrenheit on hot days. Your tomato roots do not want 95-degree soil. They want 70 to 80 degrees. Mulching. The paths brings the whole system temperature down. Here is how to set it up. After you have mulched your beds with straw or shredded leaves at the depths I described, take additional straw and lay it 4 to 6 inches deep on every pathway. Yes, it uses more material, but Eli told me something that stuck with me. He said, bare ground is wasted ground. Either it is growing something for you or it is working against you. There is no in between. This full coverage approach also dramatically reduces weed pressure because weeds have nowhere to germinate. In my own garden, I went from spending 3 to 4 hours a week pulling weeds to maybe 20 minutes. That time savings alone made the extra. Straw worth it. Now, if you are following along and starting to see how this system fits together, I want to mention something. What I am showing you today is just one piece of a much bigger system I have put together after 30 years of homesteading and learning from Amish neighbors like Eli. It is called the 30-Day Amish Self-Sufficient Garden Protocol. And it is everything I have learned from my Amish neighbors over the last 3 decades, organized into a simple, day-by-day plan you can start this season. It covers the full 5 defense layers to build a garden that defends itself from the soil up. It has got the complete 4-bed crop rotation system that stops disease and pests before they ever get a foothold. And it includes the companion planting field guide, so you know exactly what to grow next to what and why. So click the link in The description right below this video, just scroll down a little and you will see it. Or alternatively, if you are watching on a television or a computer screen, you can take out your phone, open up your camera like you are going to take a picture, and hold it up to the QR code you see on screen right now. A little link will pop up at the top of your phone screen. Just tap that, and it will bring you right to the guide. No typing, no searching. Either way works. I think it is the best investment you can make in your garden this year. This next part is where most people make a critical mistake, and I made it myself for years. Timing your mulch application around your plants is not as simple as just piling it on the day you transplant. There is a sequence that matters, and getting it wrong can actually hurt your yields. For warm season crops like tomatoes, peppers, squash, and cucumbers, do not mulch until the plants are established and the soil is warm. Wait until your transplants have been in the ground for 10 to 14 days and are showing new growth. The soil temperature should be at least 60 degrees Fahrenheit at a depth of 4 inches. You can check this with a simple soil thermometer, which costs about $8 at any garden center. The reason for waiting is that mulch insulates. That is its whole job. But in spring, you want the sun warming your soil to encourage root growth. If you mulch too early, you trap cool temperatures in, and your warm season crops sit there doing nothing for weeks. For cool season crops like lettuce, spinach, peas, and brassicas, the opposite is true. You want to mulch early because these crops prefer cooler soil. In zones 6 through 9, getting mulch down around cool season transplants right away can extend their productive window by 2 to 3 weeks before they bolt in the heat. Here is the visual cue Eli taught me. For tomatoes and peppers, wait until you see the first set of true new leaves emerging after transplant. That tells you the roots have taken hold and the plant is actively growing. Then mulch around the base, keeping the material 2 to 3 inches away from the stem to prevent moisture sitting against the stem and inviting rot. For squash and cucumbers, wait until the vines begin to run, which usually happens about 3 weeks after transplant. Then mulch heavily around and between the plants, pulling the straw right up to where the vine meets the soil, but not piling it against the main stem. Now here is where the yield multiplication really happens, and it is the part of this system that convinced me the Amish were onto something most of us completely miss. Mulch does not just save water and block weeds. Over time, it feeds the soil. This is the long game, and it is where the real power is. Every fall, instead of raking up and removing the season's mulch, the Amish leave it in place. They might add a fresh layer of straw or leaves on top, but the old material stays. Over winter, that bottom layer breaks down, pulled into the soil by earthworms and microbial activity. By spring, what was once 6 inches of straw has become a thin layer of rich, dark organic matter integrated into the top few inches of your beds. This is free compost. You are building soil without buying a single bag of amendment. Penn State Extension research has documented that gardens using continuous organic mulch for 3 or more consecutive years show measurably higher organic matter content, improved water holding capacity, and significantly larger earthworm populations compared to bare soil or synthetically mulched gardens. Here is what I observed in my own beds. After the first year of full Amish-style mulching, I noticed the soil was easier to dig and held, moisture better. After the second year, I could see earthworm activity every time I pulled back the mulch layer. By the third year, my soil had transformed from the hard, pale clay I started with into dark, crumbly, living soil that smelled like a forest floor. I reduced my compost purchases by about 75% because the mulch was doing the soil building work for me. The practical step here is simple. At the end of every growing season, do not clean up your mulch. Leave it. Add 2 to 3 inches of fresh straw or shredded leaves on top. Walk away. Let the biology do its work over winter. In spring, pull back the mulch briefly to let the soil warm for your warm season crops. Then push it back once plants are established. You are building a self-improving system that gets better every single year. Let me walk through some patterns I have noticed over the years. Habits most of us fall into that the Amish approach handles differently. The first pattern is mulching too thin. I did this for over a decade. A couple inches of shredded bark around each plant, and I thought I was mulching. but 2 inches of mulch breaks down in weeks and lets weeds through almost immediately. The Amish go 6 to 8 inches with straw because they know it compresses. If your mulch is not deep enough to block all light from reaching the soil surface, it is not deep enough. The second pattern is buying expensive mulch products, dyed mulch, rubber mulch, even premium bagged cedar chips. The Amish would never spend money on something they can source for free. Straw costs a few dollars a bale from any farm supply store, and one bale covers about 30 to 40 square feet at the proper depth. Shredded leaves cost nothing. The best mulch materials are the cheapest ones. The third pattern is removing mulch at the end of the season. I used to rake everything up in fall because I thought a clean garden was a healthy garden. All I was doing was throwing away free soil building material and leaving my beds bare and exposed to winter erosion. The Amish leave their mulch in place year-round and simply add on top. That continuous coverage protects the soil from compaction, erosion, and temperature extremes even when nothing is growing. The fourth pattern is mulching right up against plant stems. This is a common mistake that can cause stem rot and invite disease. Always leave a 2 to 3 inch ring of bare space around each stem. Think of it like a donut of mulch with the plant in the center hole. The Amish are very deliberate about this, and Eli corrected me on it the first year I tried his method. Now, here is the technique I promised you at the beginning, and it is the one that genuinely changed my fall gardening. Late in the season, when most gardeners are winding down, Eli does something I had never seen before. He takes fresh straw about 10 to 12 inches deep and builds what he calls a blanket over his fall crops, things like carrots, beets, turnips, and late season kale. He does this about 2 to 3 weeks before the first expected frost. The crops are still growing underneath. The thick straw layer acts as insulation, trapping ground heat and creating a microclimate that can keep the soil temperature 10 to 15 degrees warmer than the outside air. His carrots stay in the ground, alive and growing, well into November, sometimes even December, depending on the year. Here is exactly how to do it. Once nighttime temperatures start dropping below 40 degrees Fahrenheit consistently, mound fresh straw 10 to 12 inches deep directly over your root crops and hardy greens. Do not pull the plants. Leave them right where they are. The straw creates a protective dome. When you want to harvest, you simply push the straw aside, pull what you need, and cover it back up. I started using this 3 years ago in Zone 6, and my last carrot harvest went from mid-October to the second week of December. That is nearly 2 extra months of fresh food from the same beds with 0 additional planting, 0 additional watering, and about 15 minutes of work piling on straw. For kale, this method kept my plants producing tender leaves through 3 hard frosts that would have killed them otherwise. One important note, this technique works best for root crops and cold hardy greens. Do not try it with tomatoes, peppers, or squash. Those crops cannot survive frost regardless of mulch depth. But for the crops it does work with, it is like getting a free extension on your growing season. Now, if everything I have shared today resonates with you and you want to take this further than one video can take you, I would really encourage you to check out the guide I put together. It is called the 30-Day Amish Self-Sufficient Garden Protocol, and it is everything I have learned from my Amish neighbors over the last 3 decades, organized into a simple day-by-day plan you can start this season. It covers the full 5 defense layers to build a garden that defends itself from the soil up. It has got the complete 4-bed crop rotation system that stops disease and pests before they ever get a foothold. And it includes the companion planting field guide, so you know exactly what to grow next to what and why. Now, there are 2 easy ways to grab it. The first way is to click the link in the description right below this video. Just scroll down a little and you will see it. The second way, if you are watching on a television or a computer screen, is to take out your phone, open up your camera like you are going to take a picture, and hold it up to the QR code you see on screen right now. A little link will pop up at the top of your phone screen. Just tap that, and it will bring you right to the guide. No typing, no searching, either way works. I think it is the best investment you can make in your garden this year. When I think back to how I used to garden, watering every single day, fighting weeds every weekend, watching my soil turn harder and drier every summer, and I compare it to what my beds look like now after just a few years of doing this the Amish way, it honestly makes me wish someone had shown me this 20 years ago. But that is the thing about good information. It does not matter when you find it. It matters what you do with it. If you try even one piece of what I shared today, come back and tell me about it in the comments. I read every one of them. Thanks for spending some time with me. I will see you in the next one.